arrested.
Tumbi's arrest is the latest catalyst of the divisions in the Jubilee Party.
The man on the street take coming up on the media portrayal of Kenya, of the state of Kenya's relationship with her neighbors.
The relationship between Kenya and East African countries at the moment, although the media is trying to depict it to be in a good relations, but some of us perceive it is not good.
Yeah, there you have it. Just a snippet of what he had to say. We'll have the more comprehensive piece right after this. All right, with me in studio to take this conversation forward is Edward Wanyonyi, who's a media researcher, media and security affairs researcher, Camera Africa. Karibu sana. Happy to have you. We also have Winnie Kamau. She's the president of the Freelancers Association in Kenya. Happy to have you as well. And also you specialize in data journalism.
Yes, I do.
We also have Douglas Okwach, who has restricted me to introducing him simply as journalist. So there you have it, Douglas Okwach, journalist. And also joining us from the Nation Media Group stable is Lucas Baraza. He is a parliamentary and political affairs editor. Happy to have you, Lucas. Your first appearance on TV. A bit nervous? A bit nervous?
No.
No, you're fine. Good. You're in good company, in the company of friends. And we only, of course, mean the best. Yes, so as you saw right before my introduction of the guests, we asked a question this week. And our question was, what do you make of Kenya's relationship with her neighbors based on media reports? This is what they had to say.
Between Kenya and East African countries at the moment, although the media is trying to depict it to be in a good relations, but some of us perceive it is not good. In that, when you see the recent xenophobic comments by Jagwa, the MP for Starehe, it clearly shows something. And the recent visit of Uhuru Kenyatta to Tanzania, it also shows something is absolutely wrong somewhere.
The Kenyan media has grown a lot in the way they are reporting in terms of the relationship between Kenya and the neighboring countries. But I think there's still a lot of room for improvement because most of the time people tend to cover the negative stories.
Personally, that the media has not brought out the message very well because we are not conversant of the relationship between the country and the neighboring countries.
The media should concentrate on the African news and also the international so that we can be well informed whatever is taking place worldwide.
Kwa mfano maneno ya the information yenye tulipata juzi kwa kupitia mjumbe wetu mmoja Honorable Jagwa, hiyo information ilikuwa imewekwa juu kabisa na ilifikia hata kufikia Tanzania na Watanzania hawakufurahia.
Rais wetu alienda Tanzania na tuliona vile alipokelewa vizuri. Hiyo relationship ndio ya muhimu katika nchi yetu Kenya. Tukaona vile hata alipokelewa vizuri, akapewa 2 peacocks na Rais Magufuli. Unaona hiyo ni upendo kati ya Tanzania na Kenya.
Kulingana na media pia ndio inatupea uhusiano bora na inatupea uhusiano muhimu katika ile nchi zingine. Media ndio inatufanya mpaka tupate ile uhusiano safi, ama tukiwa na shida na nchi zingine kama wakati fulani Tanzania wakati walienda wakapata ng'ombe za Wakenya wakaichukua. It was only that the other day ndio tumeona kumbe Tanzania pia wanaweza fanya kitu mzuri wakati walikaribisha rais. Otherwise with us tulikuwa tunajua tu Tanzania pia wanakuwa na kisirani.
All right, those were the views on the media portrayal of the relationship between Kenya and her neighbors. Most specifically, of course, most recently was President Uhuru Kenyatta's visit to Tanzania. Douglas, why do you think the portrayal of their cordial relationship was such big news? You know, the story about the peacocks, President Kenyatta saying, you know, his son, was it Jomo? I think it was, you know, is welcome to go and find a wife in Tanzania. Why do you think that made the news?
I think
There are two things here. First, I've just listened to what the ordinary people are saying, which basically is derived from what they get from the media. So there are issues of perception, and there are also issues of facts and reality. Because what people know, they know as a result of what they consume from the media, whether it's television, whether it's radio, whether it's newspapers. But sometimes people also travel, because if you look at the proximity of these three East African countries to one another, it means there are people who can cross the border to the other side, and the other people who can also cross the border to this other side. So there are things they actually see, like this thing about cows and so on and so forth. There are things they actually see. So the perception that is entrenched in the minds of many Kenyans is that Tanzania is actually hostile to us. And most of that, I think, they consume from the media.
Okay.
Kenyan leaders have made that very plain in some meetings. And they have actually seen some things that suggest that that relationship is not quite too smooth.
Okay.
Yes.
Winnie, did it come as a surprise to you? Seeing them laughing, you know, talking about Tanzanian wine and all that. Did it come as a surprise to you?
I think it was a bit of a shocker just to see how Magufuli was responding, like a bromance of sorts between Uhuru and Magufuli, and you're thinking, wait a minute, what happened? Because for a long time we've always perceived, since when Uhuru came into power, they've never had that bromance within them. It's not the same relationship you'll find between Kagame and Uhuru, or Museveni and Uhuru, or even the Somalian Prime Minister. You'll never find the same kind of relationship. But now this one was like a notch further, and you're thinking, wow, let's see how long the peacocks will survive.
Oh, wow. Okay, but could your reaction have been informed by the news you'd been consuming?
Definitely. It's mainly the news that we consume every day, and more so what we consume on social media. So social media goes in and tells us that, this is what is happening. And even the relationships when you have with them, especially at the border, you'll find the way they will treat you is not the same as the way you can get that reception at the when you get into Kenya. So even at Namanga, you're thinking, what? Okay, wait a minute. Let me chill kidogo, because if I bring in my Kenyan aggressiveness here, I'll just be slowed down. And I've seen that, like even when doing reports, just crossing the border, it has been a bit tough. But I'm hoping for the best now going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Edward, was it for you perhaps an exercise in public relations? Were you skeptical when you heard, when you saw or heard Magufuli speak about the peacocks and, you know, them being brothers?
Well, I think it is, if you look at the history of Kenya relations with other East African countries, then you appreciate that there is state relations at that level. And then there is just, you know, what lawyers call obiter dicta, what is passing, you know. It has got no meaning. So even these flare-ups that have been coming up here and there, they really have not shaken the relationship at state level. The state level relationship is still there, simply because all these East African countries are so much interlinked, like CMS twins, especially in terms of economy, in terms of people, in terms of relations. You really cannot disconnect the two. You know, it's so hard for us to, like when people were saying that, oh, because of Migingo, let's go to war with Uganda. It can't happen. It's not practically feasible. We can have here and there differences, but does not necessarily affect the status of our diplomatic relations and what is at stake if we were to actually think about any issue in terms of escalation. So it is just normal. Normal was what you'll have a minor conflict with your boss, your line manager, or at home with your siblings, but it does not necessarily mean that the family is broken.
All right. So you didn't view it as an exercise in public relations?
No, it's just normal. This is just a neighborly visit. The way you'll go and just see your neighbor. I mean, and maybe they have traveled and they've come back and you're just going to see them. So it was purely neighborliness, nothing new.
Lucas, when you read about President Uhuru Kenyatta praying for Magufuli's mother, ailing mother, did it make you question some of the headlines we've been carrying? Have we been exaggerating the true nature of the relationship between, for instance, okay, in this case, the case study is Kenya and Tanzania?
No, I can't say we have been exaggerating, because what we have been doing is just reporting the truth, the happenings in the two countries. And remember, the visit came just days after Star MP had made some outrageous remarks about foreigners in the country, including Tanzanians. So by Uhuru going to Tanzania, it was a big message, political message that he was sending to Kenyans and the East Africans at large. So what the media is doing is just reporting the truth and what's happening between the two countries.
Yes,
I
Douglas.
just wanted to add a little that there's also something historical about the perceived tensions between Kenya and Tanzania, and this dates back to the days of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, where a Kiswahili saying wandugu zetu wa Kenya nyang'au, I don't know whether I've said it well, emerged. So it has always been perceived as hostile. Tanzanians generally see as Winnie put it, as aggressive, as go-getters. They are somehow laid back. That's not their nature. So there's a general fear of Kenyans in Tanzania. And even if you look at our politics, the way some politicians in Tanzania aligned themselves with some parties and some people in Kenya in the last election was also quite interesting. And ahead of Uhuru's visit to Tanzania, I think there was even a rumor, quote unquote, that somebody paved that way. And that somebody said to be none other than the former prime minister, who seems to be enjoying a good relationship with the Tanzanian president, John Pombe Magufuli, who they have a sort of history with together.
Okay.
Yes.
Edward, this supposed close-knit relationship between Baba and Magufuli, was that also a creation of the media?
Not necessarily. I think those are relations. These are people who have been, they've had their relationships created. But I think it's just the media brought it forward. And more or less, when you start looking at the kind of reportage that comes out in terms of Tanzania, and especially when Magufuli became the president, then the whole association was there. I remember during the 2017 elections, there was a whole debate about whether the NASA center is, domiciled in Tanzania. But as what Douglas has just alluded to, we have to accept one thing, that we took different parts of modernization after post-independence. We went towards capitalism. I mean, Tanzania for a long time maintained socialism. We have an acknowledgement that the tribe is bigger in Kenya. In Tanzania, the country is bigger. And so our stature and our dominance and our assertiveness per se, in terms of even the market, look at our economy, it's heavily, sophisticated because of that aggressiveness, which Tanzanians are not yet there as such, and they're moving at their pace. So I think it's a cultural issue that we are looking at, and not necessarily a state issue. It's not a state relationship issue that we're having. Of course, there are those tensions that we had initially in terms of the Serengeti issue, whether we're going to allow our tourists to go to Tanzania and we are going to have the reciprocity. But at that level, which can be sorted at the East African community level, you have layers in terms of our diplomatic embassies coming together, you have many layers of engagement. But the other issues that are being raised are purely cultural, to my understanding.
So you're saying this suspicion, at least on the part of Tanzanians as I hear it, it preceded President Uhuru Kenyatta and Magufuli's terms in office.
It's historical.
Winnie, it was like you talked about NASA having a center in Tanzania, the reports of that, yes? So now, did we make too much of this perceived close relationship between Baba and Magufuli, and how perhaps it would impact Magufuli's relationship with President Uhuru Kenyatta should he have defended his seat, which he did?
Yes, we did. We kind of reinforced, actually the visit that came from that emanated from the recent remarks by Jaguar, reinforced that myth or that narrative that that subtle narrative that we've always had, that Magufuli has always been pro ODM or pro Raila, and like they said, the relationship they've always had, that cordial relationship, and has now spilled over now to the handshake. So we can almost feel the handshake still working in the East African market, and I'm hoping that this is just the beginning of new things that are going to happen, because I have friends in Tanzania who are worried because of what is going on in Tanzania right now, with Magufuli refusing guys to get work permits. There are no extension of work permits. They only want the locals to take over. But I guess, like we said, like even did I call you Edwin? Edward said that it's like a seamless relationship, conjoined together in terms of trade and in terms of us being, apart from being neighbors, we have relatives there in Tanzania and in Uganda and in Somalia. We are all, and reinforcing what Uhuru said, that we should marry across borders so that we remove this tribe thing that we've always had, especially in Kenya.
Okay. Yeah. All right. On my laptop screen, I have a headline. Vodacom, you mentioned Sylvia Mulinge. Vodacom Tanzania says Sylvia Mulinge denied work permit. Yeah, there it is. It's on... It is, yes, and that was September 28th, 2018. Other than that, I think we've been carrying a few headlines alongside your comments on the subject. But we had the issue of chicks being burnt at the border, a health concern that was in Tanzania. We had the whole issue of Kenya saying we will not allow Tanzanian Twavans to access the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, and of course that was viewed in retaliation for Tanzania restricting access to Kenyan Twavans crossing over into the Serengeti. So, Lucas, is it a media narrative, or do you think that the relationship between Kenya and Tanzania has indeed been strained?
The relation between Kenya and Tanzania, the relationship has not been good for some time. And it's mainly because of our different ideologies. As my colleague has said, they believed in communism and they were capitalists. So that relationship only has been worsening in the recent past, maybe because of trade and other things. And what the media has been doing is just highlighting those issues. Okay. And I can say it's the media which has brought those issues to the table and even helped to mend the diplomatic tips instead of destroying them, because it's because of our reporting that we have seen now President Kenyatta intervening and going to Tanzania, maybe to cool the political temperatures that were there after the Star MP made his statement. So the media has not been exaggerating anything.
So do you think perhaps then it's the Kenyan government that has been trying to downplay these tensions because President Uhuru Kenyatta is so keen on integration, Douglas? And perhaps to vindicate the media, there has been a team that has been formed to resolve these trade disputes.
Yeah. Talking integration, there's also something historic about this integration, that at some point in 1977, the East African community, as we knew it, broke up, and the three East African countries went their different ways. There was a lot of acrimony at that time, and the country that stood accused specifically was Kenya, by both Tanzania and Uganda, especially on account that Kenya had shut its border and kept at home common property owned by the three East African community countries. So that acrimony sort of petered out along the way. The integration process restarted again, and it's still moving on. So sometimes in between you hear things like coalition of the willing, where now we have, the East African community is now bigger. Now we have Rwanda, we have Burundi, we have South Sudan, and DR Congo recently indicated interest that it wanted to join. So there's always a shift. And I do not think the media creates these things. These things actually happen. Incidences like the Kenyan energy minister traveling to Tanzania and finding quite a situation there. Today, Rwanda are planning its railway through Kenya. The next day, it's waking up. Now the railway is going through Tanzania. Uganda saying, oh, no, we no longer want our pipeline to go through Kenya because Kenya is usually unstable during election time. We suffer major economic losses. So these intrigues are there, and the media has always reported them as they happen. Even dreams of leaders like the Ugandan president, who has always had an aspiration to be the big boss in East Africa. So these intrigues are there. I think the media just reports them as they happen. So I would not say that the media creates or exaggerates these events. These events are real, they actually happen. If the Ugandan pipeline was supposed to pass through Kenya, and the next day there is a different meeting between the Ugandan president and the Tanzanian president and the exchange of plan, that's true, it happens. So the media reports it as it happens. Yes.
All right. Finally, on the subject of Kenya and Tanzania, before we go on a break, there is this screenshot that has been making the rounds. It's on my laptop. I hope it'll be on your screen soon. It's a bit pixelated, but there it is. Uhuru akutana na pombe. Edward, what do you make of that tag? Did you see it?
Yes. Well, I think it's just a twist. I will just take it as an interesting twist. But as Douglas just alluded to, that there are issues which we have to accept the fact that our economies have been changing across East Africa. Maybe the question in terms of media reportage should be in terms of, do we really have the right kind of desks handling East African issues? Or is it time that newsrooms have desks handling East African issues? And at that level, then bring in more context, more sophistication in terms of reporting, more broader perspectives, so that then people do not just look at, one of the captures, headlines, and they go on to sensationalize, but they're grounded on more factual issues in terms of the context in East Africa. Okay,
interesting. You bring up an interesting point. And we'll get Winnie, Douglas, and Lucas's take on that tag, as well as what you're saying. We need to allocate more resources to covering those issues right after this break. Of President Uhuru Kenyatta's recent visit. Winnie, we had put up a tag on screen, and that is Uhuru Akutana na Pombe. That was a tag written right here on NTV. What did you make of it?
Well, looks like freedom meets. Yes, but I guess it felt good to see this, in not the caption, but just to see the photo. It felt good for me, and like I had alluded before, that I've seen many of my friends who work in Tanzania, and they're like, well, we are hoping that this will be the beginning of new things in Tanzania. I hope they will drop all these things, all these caveats they're putting on Kenyans who are working in Tanzania. And it's not only Kenyans only who are suffering. The other expatriates who are working in Tanzania are suffering because of all that's going on with the Magufuli rules. But for me, I think it's the beginning of new things. And I'm optimistic that things will change for the better, and especially right now when we are saying, if you go to Gikomba, surely things are thick there. There are so many people who've come in from other countries, and it's good. Let's trade, let's do all these things, but let's also again love ourselves a little bit. Self-love is important, I think. Don't say that. Self-love for Kenyans. We need to love ourselves a little bit, because it's a free trade area, but we need to love ourselves a little bit so that we can be able to know to what extent we can give ourselves away. Yani, we accommodate other people, but also let's love ourselves a little bit.
Okay, Douglas, I'll throw the ball to you. First of all, what did you make of that tag?
Now I'll talk about that tag. Yes. I see my two colleagues.
Was it an editor just being cheeky?
I'll talk about that tag.
Say that
you see, there are two things. I write tags. So there might be template constraints that certain words make the tag longer, and therefore it does not fit the template. You can't change the template, so the template stays. So what you'll have to do is to play around with the words. But I find this particular tag cheeky. That's really my view. It's cheeky because John Pombe Magufuli, he has 3 names. We usually try to settle for the last name. And given my understanding and the understanding of other people of what that name means, I read mischief in the use of that tag. So here I think the Nation Media Group should be called out on this particular tag, and it should be made plain to them that there was some mischief here.
Okay.
Although on a light, but there was mischief.
All right,
there
Lucas,
certainly was.
I will give you the opportunity to respond on behalf of the nation. What did you make of it?
I think that's one of our best captions.
So you stand by it?
I stand by it because one, our core work is to inform the public and maybe entertain. And I can say that caption is entertaining. First, it's attractive, it's entertaining, and it's straight to the point, and it's objective. We have not lied anything. It's Uhuru who was meeting John Pombe Magufuli. So we have no apologies.
There are some things you cannot say on national television, but that caption is certainly cheeky.
Cheeky,
yes.
All right.
The mischief is known.
Okay, Lucas, another question to you. Something that was raised by Edward is a question of resources. But the Nation Media Group, I'm just looking at their website, and they have, or rather it states that we have 69 media brands in 4 countries. How closely do we work with counterparts across our borders?
Yeah, it's true. The Nation Media Group is the biggest media house in this region, in East and Central Africa. We have branches in all the East African countries, and we have TV stations there, we have radio stations and newspapers. So we have correspondents in all those places who feed us with the information on a daily basis. But when it comes to Uhuru's visit to Tanzania, that visit was private. It was a private visit. So in that case, we are relying mostly on information from the presidential communication unit. So, but we have correspondents in all the East Africa countries because we take this region very seriously, and it's important for the growth of the media.
Proven by, I guess, the existence of the East African continued existence. Now, I want to move now further across East Africa's borders and deal with the ad that was for the New York Times Nairobi bureau chief. Let me just find it. Yes, there I have it. And this is what it says. Our Nairobi bureau chief has a tremendous, and this was posted 5 days ago, a tremendous opportunity to dive into news and enterprise across a wide range of countries, from the deserts of Sudan and the pirate seas of the Horn of Africa down through the forests of Congo, where Winnie says she was when this went out, and the shores of Tanzania. It is an enormous patch of vibrant, intense, strategically important territory with many vital storylines, including terrorism, the scramble for resources, the global contest with China, and the constant push and pull of democracy versus authoritarianism. Okay, forgive me for that. The ideal candidate should enjoy jumping on news, be willing to cover conflict, and also be drawn to investigative stories. There is also the chance to delight our readers with unexpected stories of hope and the changing rhythms of life in a rapid evolving region. Okay, I have tried my level best to bring out the tone of the advert, but I believe these ladies did it better than I have.
Yes, they did.
Our Nairobi bureau chief has a tremendous opportunity to dive into news and enterprise across a wide range of countries, from the deserts of Sudan and the pirate seas of the Horn of Africa, down through the forests of the Congo and the shores of Tanzania. It is an enormous patch of vibrant, intense, and strategically important territory with many vital storylines, including
terrorism, the scramble for resources, the global contest with China, and the constant push and pull of democracy versus authoritarianism.
The ideal candidate should enjoy jumping on the news.
Yes, the sisters, well, the message, the Lamb Sisterhood got their message out to the right people, because Michael Slackman, and he's the international editor for the New York Times, responded, and he says, "Dear Lamb Sisterhood, thank you. I loved and learned from reading your dramatic reading. I deserved it." He goes on to state, "That job posting was my doing, and I want to explain what happened. We are currently looking for 3 correspondents to cover Africa, and I saw this as an opportunity to find the best there is." He goes on to say, "But I plead guilty to taking a shortcut. Rather than write a new job description, a posting from about 18 months ago went out. I gave it a cursory look and approved it, mea culpa. As international editor, I have the privilege to lead one of the finest reporting staff in the world, and the New York Times is committed to covering Africa, not as if it was some stereotype, but because it matters," all right? And I just want to look at some of the responses to that. Winnie, I saw you responded, but I'll start with Emily Kaiser, and she says, "Thank you for your response. If you were to post a new job description, what might it say? Would it be, would be great to hear more about your coverage priorities. Much of the coverage I see still focuses on war, disaster, poverty, and disease." Winnie, what is BC? You say we are looking for a new bureau. Okay, all right. Okay, we are looking for a new bureau chief who will focus on stories coming from Africa, the new technologies, business innovations, human interest stories, impact of development in countries, the impact of China in African economies, and look at data, basically what the numbers are saying. Udwak Amimo also responded. And she said, thank you for the apology. This is an opportunity to address how Africa is covered in Western media, particularly in the New York Times. What would it look like if you applied the strategic design thinking used to launch new products or beats, etc., to your coverage of Africa? And I will end with that comment by Dr. Sam Kamau, who says, thank you for responding to our concerns. Perhaps we need to have a bigger discussion on how the West has always covered Africa. By your own admission, this was a posting from 18 months ago, which still raises the same concerns. A shift is needed, and thank you for recognizing this. Edward, did you take offense when you came across that ad for the Nairobi bureau chief?
Yes, offense was there, but at the same time, it's just an acknowledgement that that is their worldview. We are right to condemn it. We are right to rewrite it. But also, one of the things which was appalling to me was that I don't see anyone among the New York staff correspondents in other regions or other New York staffers condemning him. There is no peer mentorship. There is no checks and balances among his own colleagues who are checking him out and calling him out. So he goes on to talk about that, but there is silence within, which for me says there's a lot of complicity. Fair enough, they can be able to do that in terms of that is their structure, and it's, you know, very subtle racism that is put out there. But also it gives us an opportunity not only to respond back, but also to ask ourselves, are we really doing justice in terms of how we project Africa and how we, even Africans ourselves, report on our on issues? Because there's death, there's famine. It is not across, but there is it. There is authoritarianism, you know, and you can see what is happening in countries like South Sudan. You see a lot of repression that is going on in the region. We have those facts. It may not be a replication or a generalization of the entire continent, but those are there. We have to acknowledge it.
Okay. Winnie, you gave them a few examples of what they described as unexpected stories of hope. Talked about the technology boom and all that.
I mean,
so I just, based on the fact that you responded, you took offense.
Yes, I couldn't, I was appalled. I was thinking, what's wrong with this guy? I mean, New York Times, this is not the first time the international media thinks that Africa is a jungle. I mean, and even, I'll say this.
Like, Africa is one country?
Yeah, yes. I mean, like, I've done travels, like last year I was in the US and somebody was asking me in a cab, so where are you from? I'm like, from Africa. And he's like, oh, Africa, I hear it's a very good continent, a very good place. So I'm thinking, this guy is not even smart enough to realize, I just said Africa, and he thinks that Africa is only one country. You know, it's that perception that people have about Africa. They've never stepped out their history. Okay, sadly, for us, we've been taught the world history. We are told these are the 7 continents. This is what happens. This, the politics of these continents and everything. But for them, they just learn what is around them, and that's it. So they have this perception that Africa is really a jungle. It's just a place where you can go in, and practically that's what Michael was thinking about. Like, you'd go and dive deep in the jungles of Congo, and I'm thinking, gee, what's wrong with these people? But I took offense, and that's why I was like, we need to look, those stories that he's talking about, war and conflict, look at it as human interest stories. Look at it as a human being reported upon, not things that, hey, that one was shot and that is. We're not looking for death all the time. We're not looking for negative stories about Africa. Technologies, M-Pesa, we are leading in, Kenya is leading. Technology has leapfrogged Africa or the world. So we are at par. You can't say that we'll have to wait until we go to the Congo, the deep forest of Congo, so that we can get stories.
Okay. But I would like to point out that when Richard Quest was in the country, he did do something on M-Pesa. Douglas, are we being unfair? Because in all honesty, let me put it to you this way, Edward and Winnie. If it bleeds, it leads. No. Even here in Kenya, when we pick our stories, what goes on the front page, if it bleeds, it leads. Are we being unfair, Douglas?
Yeah, I'd like to pick from that remark of yours that, for starters, I think, personally, I have a lot of respect for the New York Times. It's a top-end publication globally. It's globally acclaimed, and it's top-notch journalism. However, unfortunately, this is the second time this year, if I'm not wrong, that we are discussing,
that they've run afoul of us, yes.
that we are discussing an international publication of stature for the wrong reasons. Now, that ad for me is gibberish. I'm sorry, I could sound old school. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't quite figure out. Probably you needed a thespian to interpret. They could have a better understanding of those movements, you know, caveman-like, you know, monkey-like. you know, it's really offending. It's not a very good ad. But then, having said that, I think it just reinforces the old stereotypes that Western media, despite the fact that they have their own reporters on the ground in African countries, they still seem to have a serious problem understanding what Africa really is. I can't remember which publication, but a while back, sometime after 2010, I think 2011, a publication of repute carried the title Africa Rising on its cover, which surprised a lot of us that really, okay, so they have now come to the realization that Africa can also indeed rise. But unfortunately, some of the gains they make, we even see the steps international media make in Africa. They make 10 steps, 1 step, and then they roll back 10 steps. We've even seen the recent surge of international media on African soil. And I'm sometimes surprised by the kind of stories they give preference, which are actually not even factual, like some cultural issues, some cultural stories, which have been widely discussed on social media. But like Winnie and Edward have pointed out, probably we also need to acknowledge as Africans that there is indeed a problem that we need to address. So while we take offense with how they project us, how they portray us, in retrospect, we should also sit back and think, so how do we do some of these things better? Why are we always portrayed as a land of disasters, of conflict, of suffering, of disease, and so on and so forth? Because there's a failure in our systems, in our leadership, which we need to address. So
what did Trump call us?
He doesn't even know Namibia. You know, he doesn't even know that their country, the president of that country, can hardly count 10 African countries. And even if he does, he'll have a number of them completely wrong. And he does that on important international fora, which is a shame, really.
Okay, but then do you blame him? He used the term shithole countries. Yes. It's after 10, yes. She used the term shithole countries, but then the news he's been consuming about countries, developing countries, including including countries on the African continent, are about death, devastation, disease, famine, Ebola. Do you blame him? If that is all he's exposed to?
But I wouldn't want even to go to excuse that. I wouldn't want to excuse that on a national television platform because ignorance cannot be justified. Okay. It can't pass. And number two, also, we cannot excuse that subtle racism in this day and age, you know, whereby someone wants to use racism, ignorance, as to justify their racism, you know. That is something we need to push back. But the other aspect, we also have to be comparative. The Economist put out an ad for also an African editor, you know, and there was a difference in terms of how they worded it. And
I guess
so
they learned.
we have to accept the fact that there has been a very strong push in terms of using the old case of stereotyping, but right now we need to put our house in order, talk back, but at the same time acknowledge the issues which are there. That for me is important, and how our medias, our own local media, covering our own stories.
Okay, Lucas, I'm going to put you on the spot. Well, what was the last positive story the nation carried about a country on the continent other than ourselves? Because, you know, DRC, when we read about stories, like if I go onto the Nation website, World News, and I click on the tab about Africa, I'll see, okay, what the latest is with as far as DRC as far as Ebola is concerned, DRC, Uganda. I get that it's relevant. It's what's the word? Okay, demands attention. Yes, I get that. But what was the last positive story we carried out of Africa, other than Ethiopia ethnic clashes? Let me try and remember which other stories are making news. You know, Sudan. Okay, there's a Sudan situation. You just can't ignore it. There's a situation in Algeria. You know, there's that whole transition of power. Give me a positive story we've carried ourselves as Kenyan media.
There are very many stories that we have carried about African countries. The only problem is
can you give me an example?
Positioning. Maybe they are not given a lot of prominence from maybe the front page. It's for the newspapers, but they are hidden inside the newspaper. But there are many on inventions in Africa, agriculture, for example, food production in Malawi. There are many good stories that we have done. It's only that the way we highlight them is what matters.
Douglas, could we perhaps be pointing one finger at the West and have 4 other fingers pointing back at us?
I think there's a debate that has been going on for quite a while, and whether it's within the ambit of the media to push that agenda, or it's outside their realm, they have nothing to do about it. Is whether we can sell more positive stories. What story, for example, because I know there are editorial meetings every day to review the stories you put out, whether it's on radio, whether it's on television, whether it's in the newspaper. How did these stories perform? When that audit happens, there is a tendency to find that political stories tend to do better. So then editors have been laid back and said, okay, let it be. We will push on with the political stories. Even when all these complaints, there have been even attempts by some media houses to start publications that are non-political. Unfortunately, even the scandals they have to look for, quote unquote, to sell on the front page of those newspapers
the political class.
Are still political related. Yeah, so it's a difficult task for us to say, for example, can coffee boom in Kiambu sell? They made money. The farmers have been well paid. If you put that on the front page of your newspaper, how many people will sell it? I think when the journalist goes there during coffee boom, they look for a sleazy story like, say, how many red light district girls have turned up in Kiambu, for example, because there's a coffee boom. So there is a deliberate attention, I may call it that, by editors to stay away from stories that are positive, which in their view are positive, yes, and are good, but do not sell, do not, count when it comes to our ratings. So you may say they have the responsibility to change, but probably they are too shy or unable or unwilling to try to make that change. Okay. But I believe that change can be made. Yeah. Right. Because every day we cannot just be reporting for 365 days in a year about Kieleweke and Tanga. And yet there are more important things happening in this country that are worth that important coverage.
Okay.
Yes.
Winnie, even as you take offense, Dr. Chris Kirubi has raised this time and again. And he says it's a narrative we push ourselves. Because if somebody sitting in New York goes online, opens the Nation website, what pops up? Ruto aides implicated in plot to assassinate the deputy president, and then the story about Kenyan scientists contributing to advancements when it comes to HIV, it's a blurb on page 7, 8, Why isn't the HIV story on the front page, And this business of alleged plot is now in the second week and it's still front page news.
I guess
are we partly to blame?
I guess what we can say about editors is that, like Douglas said, they're not courageous enough. Because you see, media shapes the thoughts and perceptions of people. And editors are not brave enough to say, let's for 1 week, let's just do development and see stories and see how that goes. If maybe a publication like Nation Media House would be courageous enough for 1 week, there's no headline on politics. Trust me, for 1 week, you still have adverts. You'll still maintain, actually you'll even double your adverts, you'll double your revenue because you have taken that courage. There are many people, there are many Kenyans, there are many people who are yearning to read something different, something that is not negative. Like you look at the news, the bulletin story, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're thinking, my God, I'm depressed. You look at the headlines, it's Kieleweke, Tangatanga, this one is saying Uhuru, and it depresses everyone. And right now, if we push ourselves and just have that courage for editors, and I challenge you editors who are watching right now, please have courage. For 1 week, let's say 1 week we are just doing development news, we'll see a total difference in the consumption and in the way, even the psyche of Kenyans, especially the Kenyans who are the consumers of the news that we produce. Okay. You'll see a change.
If I'm not mistaken, the Nation has actually tried, but there was a dip in readership. Is my information accurate?
Yeah, you are correct. That's very true. You know, our stories are controlled by the audience, what the audience likes most. But at Nation, we've been trying to balance the stories. At least if the front page has different stories. If the main story is political, then the second or the third one will not or should not be political. And we also have different publications for our audiences. For example, the Business Daily is specifically for development and other issues. They rarely dwell on politics. So we have different ways of addressing those needs so that we ensure we don't leave development in our stories.
Okay.
I think there's a bind here, if I may just jump in there, that, you know, advertisers look at, if you talk specifically about newspapers, they say, okay, you want me to put my ad in your newspaper. How many copies do you sell? So in order to attract advertising, because of circulation figures, which actually newspapers don't make money from, they still just have to go with, like Lucas says, the stories that are in demand out there, so that they push up circulation figures. When they do those whatevers, they find that the rating of prime time is so many views. So what were the stories? The circulation figures of the Daily Nation is so many copies. So what were the stories? So they want to stick to those stories to maintain the figures so that advertisers stay on board. The moment the readership dips or the viewership dips, advertisers also begin to take off. So there is some kind of dilemma here.
But no.
Okay, Edward hasn't said much on the subject. I'll give you the opportunity, Edward.
The whole world is going through a disruption phase in terms of readership and audiences. We cannot have this thinking that we are going to still work with the same old model. So we need to go back to innovation. And we need to test out a number of prototypes in terms of our products and our readership that is going, because that readership is moving to something else. If you look right now, I mean, over-the-top platforms are taking a big chunk of what people are watching. I mean, you wake up in the morning, the first thing you'll do is not buy the newspaper, go to the TV, you'll look at your phone, and you'll get the first news on your phone. Yeah. So we are seeing that an audience is shifting. I would not want to accuse the media that it has not done that. I've seen stories media has done on front page on development issues. And at the same time, we have to be careful in this debate not to fall into the trap that saying that, you know, politics is purely about succession. Politics is also about holding those people who are in office accountable. The media has done that. So to the extent that we stand to be accused as journalists or as media people that we're just being political or politicizing issues, those are two different issues. The biggest thing that is lacking in our market is innovation. Let's take out our prototypes like what Lucas has talked about, the Business Daily model. Why has it not been taken to other platforms to other genres, for example, so that you have a platform like that, dealing with science. You have a platform like that, Business Daily, that dealing with sports. We are not investing depth and analysis in our media. We are doing coverage. Coverage cannot take us with the 21st century reader. The 21st century reader is exposed. He wants more than just simply coverage. He wants context. He wants data. He wants a lot of understanding in terms of the news that he's receiving, because he will receive the news from even the friend who will be able to take with the phone. Citizen journalism with us. Our media, the media house of the future, will be the one which is best on what I call a scientific media house, which has more analysis, more data. And how many newsrooms have research departments?
But I think,
so where are we putting our money? We are putting money on many correspondents, but that number does not help us. It does not help us. We are not, tennis as a sport attracts more money, yet there are only 2 people or maybe 4 people play. Why? Yes, it's not about quantity, and that's the conversation newsrooms have to accept.
Okay, Winnie, if you can please bring this conversation to a close, because I want us to transition onto politics.
Before we go to the political arena, I think for once we need to be courageous, and I'll still insist, editors, be courageous enough and let's go development stories. Let's remove this thing, because I know maybe Lucas said that you guys tried it out and you had a dip. Maybe it was a dip for 1 day, 2 days. But once after some time, Kenyans forget easily, remember? After some time, they will start adapting to this new change. And then within no time, advertisers are back. And we are continuing the conversation in a different way. Right now, the psyche of an average Kenyan is thinking it's all about suicides, death, femicides. And right now, everyone is talking about femicide. It's not all doom and gloom. There's so many good stories that are there. And like for us, as Association of Freelance Journalists, we have Talk Africa, and we do development stories. And on that portal on Talk Africa, we have readership. We have people coming in and asking questions, because we do about farming, we do about business, all these things, and people are reading. There are people who are thirsty for a different type of news, not the normal news that we have about negative things all the time. Yeah.
All right. So we'll conclude it there. But what kind of stories are you looking for in the news? I will be reading a few of your comments after this break. Welcome back. You're watching Presspass. With me in studio is Edward, Winnie, Douglas, and Lucas, all journalists. Now, before we went on the break, we're discussing coverage of African stories. So just a bit of feedback. David Kebiro says, in selling political stories, the editors put too much flesh and end up distorting what the politicians themselves meant. And that's a perfect segue into what we're about to discuss. Constant Cap gives us an idea for a positive story. He says, positive stories on the African continent. Harambee Stars beating Taifa Stars. Then we have Nafula Brenda, who says the media is very active while the people are passive, thus they never have a say on what the media disseminates. The people believe whatever comes from the media is true and therefore they will not question it. Is that true, Edward? I don't think so.
Not necessarily. People have the agency. People have the agency. People see. People respond. There's platforms for feedback. I mean, so we don't have to think that as media we are just pumping information and then there is passivity coming from the audience. Not at all. Okay. Especially in this day and age where you have a lot of audience-generated content. So I think the audiences have agency.
All right. Now, Fula, just to make Edward's point, you can text us on the toll-free number 20686 and let us know what you think about what we're putting on air. 20686. Now, I did say David Kebiro's tweet leads us into what I want to discuss next, and that that follows this particular headline. There we have it. If we can just look at the first one again. Let's just replay it again. And then if possible, if we can just pause on the first headline. It should be just around the corner. There we go. Ruto aides sought over murder letter. Now, that particular headline led to this tweet from Dennis Itumbi, and I have it on my screen. He says, journalism is at its lowest form when Daily Nation pens a story and reproduces allegation after allegation, but does not bother to call or text any of the communication officers in the presidency they claim are being sought by the DCI and are in hiding. Objective verification. Lucas, you did not call Itumbi, your people did not call Itumbi to find out if he was in hiding, although he does say that the story did not name names, but Cyprian Nyakundi had tweeted out some names: David Mugonyi, Emmanuel Salam, Dennis Itumbi, and so he says it was not a stretch of the imagination to connect the dots and figure out who the nation was making reference to. That he claims he was called the following day after the story ran. Is that true? What's your defense?
The media are role to investigate stories, and this story Itumbi is talking about is of public interest. So we had a duty to do a follow-up on it. Our investigations led us to the DCI with sources, credible sources in the DCI's office who gave us the information. They told us the investigations are leading to the DP's office. And we didn't mention any name because no one had been mentioned at that time. So the public was waiting maybe to get more information on the assassination claims. So before this story was published, I believe what was done is to verify those informations. And it's not only done by the reporter, but also the editors have to verify that our sources are credible and are reliable. And that's exactly what we did. Okay. So we reported as per our sources from the DCI.
All right. Now, Justice Wanga is the one who penned this particular story, yes, if I'm not mistaken. He reports to you. Yes. Did you find out from him if he picked up the phone and called? We would have had Justice Wanga on the show as well, but unfortunately he's out of town, as far as I'm aware. But did he pick up the phone, as given this story relates to, did he pick up the phone and just speak to any of these aides he made reference to?
At that moment, he verified the information from both sides, from the DP's office, sources in the DP's office again, credible sources and reliable sources, and then from the DCI's office. Those are the sources that we used.
Okay. Douglas, do we abuse these sources? Not attributing particular remarks to a particular person.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Now, I'd like to state that journalism or journalists do not always set out to do harm. That do no harm is a basic principle of journalism. Although what we write can hurt, but we aspire not to harm people. But having said that, the reason this issue is even here for discussion is that there were acts of omission or commission. That's why it's even an issue for discussion. Now, the problem here is that when it comes to Dennis Itumbi and his current situation, or his situation for a long time, is that there are several forces at play here. All vying against each other. Now, my main concern is to what extent was this Daily Nation reporting independent of those forces? Would I be assuming too much when I say we cannot rule out completely that some of these forces, for or against, which are at play in this whole Itumbi saga, might have influenced the Daily Nation reporting? I do not know, but it could be the case that it did. Now, the problem with this Itumbi story is that it mimics the Philemona Mwilu saga, where the Nation seemed to have been involved in either, I don't know whether to call it preemptive or predictive reporting, so that what the Nation report comes to pass. It's a strange kind of journalism for me, and I do not know in which genre I can place it, but it does happen. Like Lucas says here very well that they did speak to sources. Now, we all know that when it comes to a matter of national public interest, like the assassination of none other than the DP, sometimes those sources must be known. So to what extent is the Daily Nation willing to disclose these sources? Or is it the Daily Nation that is required to disclose these sources? That's really important. Now, secondly, I think the media should also be wary, having said that, the media should also be wary of people, of individuals who want to use subterfuge to push their own agenda, to pursue their own personal goals. Again, without naming names, we know how certain individuals are where they are, and we could also predict where they want to be in the future. So it's a very complicated scenario. But overall, I would like to say that objectivity in situations like this may be elusive and not really important, in my view.
Okay.
Yes.
Winnie, when you submit a story for review to RTN, what rules govern, first of all, how you manage sources? Can you just state that sources, you know, in every, do you make reference to sources in exceptional circumstances? And are you required to divulge or make known who these sources are to the desk? What are the rules that govern it?
I mean, when you're talking about sources, there's the rule that we all know, the rule of thumb that we should never divulge to the public who our sources are, for maybe just safeguarding who they are. And
but not in all cases, though.
Yes, but again, sources are should, even if we want to divulge or we want to say who they are, at times we need to know how credible they are. Our sources can really, some of them can mislead. I've seen sources misleading. And there's one colleague of mine, he did follow up with one of the sources, and actually we came to find out later that it was a trap. And it was government using those sources so that they could trap him, so that they could come out and say that, you see, your story is not credible on that basis, and that would water down the story. But the good thing is that he had other sources included, and that made it more, it was able to balance the story. But I guess at times, even as we're trying to protect our sources, we have to know who they really are, their credibility, and how firm they are. I remember the story of Alai and him. I felt bad for the source that gave him the pictures, because I guess Alai, let me bring in Alai story. Like Alai does not know the basic rules of journalism. You have to protect, safeguard that particular person that is giving you a story or a tip. You have to safeguard that person, because you know the next day you'll still need them. You'll still need them for the next story and the next one. So I guess, again, we need to protect them, but also we need to look at their credibility and how firm they are.
Okay, before I come to you, Edward, let's listen in on what the PS Karanja Kibicho had to say on the subject this afternoon.
Your name has been adversely mentioned as the man who is giving the deputy president sleepless nights, and of course there was that allegations of a plot to assassinate him, and the allegations have been that you're the man behind it. Maybe what do you have to say about it?
I had hoped you would ask me about the flow of water, because that's what brought us here. I would be very reserved in responding to useless and baseless allegations because they are under police investigation. But I would really appeal that we are really credited with some intelligence, that we have some brains better than what we are hearing. And it's unfortunate that our country can occupy space and space of media talking about imaginations.
Edward,
well,
is the media talking about imaginations? Okay, all of this emanated from a particular letter where, I don't know, you've seen the letter, yeah? We had the name of the sender blocked out. You know, any identifying information was blocked out. And in the letter, it said PS Kibicho stood up and, you know, outlined the agenda for this meeting, where it said that CS Munya, CS Sisili Kariuki, CS James Masharia, and CS Musheru were present. And apparently, there are 3 items on the agenda, one of which was, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but something about protecting the president's legacy in Mount Kenya and the Mount Kenya diaspora, which is, I believe, the rest of Kenya. And the last final agenda item was with regard to the deputy president. And it's alleged that Kibicho referenced what happened to the late Professor George Saitoti in the meeting. Is it true what Kibicho is saying, that we've based all this on imaginations?
Well, I think he has a right to his opinion, and it's true that the matter is under police investigations. My only take would be 2 things which my colleague Lucas and Douglas have said. One, we have a duty in terms of the editorial desk will have a duty to protect the sources that have been given, and at no time they should be able to be divulged, especially on a sensitive matter like this. So that is a cardinal rule. It should be protected, because you balance in terms of risk and harm. And some of these stories can be blind, or they can be multi-dimensional. So you may want to release the information, and then after some time it changes. And what Douglas has said, there are some stories which are of high-level orchestration of power plays. And in such an environment, you may never know who is actually telling you the truth and who is not telling you the truth. But also, I have a concern that we have a situation whereby everyone seems very determined to throw the media under the bus when they screw up, when they mess up. And it's something we need to really think about it, especially in our context as a country, that when a politician fails in their duty, or any public person fails in their duty, they feel like it's right to justify throwing the media under the bus so that it becomes a punching bag. We saw that during the 2007 and 2008 elections. And we feel like it's something we need to call out some of these politicians and leaders when they want to use the media as a defense for that.
The media took my comment out of context.
Yes, that kind of statement is always there. They
yeah.
misquoted and that kind of thing. But having said that, I think it's a chance we need to ask as the media, and editors need to ask themselves, especially the risks and the degrees that are involved, especially in terms of headlining. And if you're being, if the headline that you're going to send out there is going to be used to, it's going to be instrumentalized to fix someone, you know, so are you really serving the audience, or are you serving other quarters to fix other wars? You know, are we really taking the political wars that we are having within parliament or within any other space to the media space? And so using the media as a space for combat. I think Lucas is in a better place to maybe
Thank
give
you for
us.
that. That was a question I had for you, Lucas. Are we being used by the political class?
No. We are not being used. In the Itumbis case and the DCJ, the nation was vindicated because the two are arrested and the matters are now in court. So what I believe is it's the media's role to tell the truth and be objective, and that's exactly what we have been doing.
Okay, let's see what the Deputy President had to say on the matter on Sunday.
Anybody who values Jubilee Party and the unity that it stands for and the transformation that upon which Jubilee was built will be responsible not to prosecute matters of our party in newspapers on the basis of rumors, on the basis of falsehood, on the basis of propaganda. They should be responsible enough to bring those issues to party structures. Then we can handle those issues and work on the party going into the future.
Lucas, even the DP himself has read those headlines and has read politics in those headlines, that people are prosecuting their cases through the media. You still disagree with that?
I still disagree because this is a very serious issue. It's an issue of national security. From the reports that we have been writing, even State House has handled it. It has been handled at State House. So it's not a small issue, and I can't believe that the DCI could be investigating an issue. I think it's a very serious issue, and as media, we have a responsibility to highlight those issues so that action can be taken.
All right. So you disagree, or that your sources tell you that these imaginations Karanja Kibicho is talking about are not imaginations?
They are not.
All right. Okay, Douglas, what guides you when you're managing the question of sources?
Well, the question of sources is tricky, particularly when it comes to investigative stories, because you know there are two levels of investigation here. There is investigation that an agency has done and is supplying you with the outcome of that investigation, say like the DCI in this instance. There's the investigation that the journalist does himself. I do not know whether referring to Lucas's statement, I do not know whether investigations can be at such a high level that can they even point to events that have not happened. Unless the person responsible for executing those events supply you with that information. Then there's a problem there, because when agencies supply reporters with information, they have an interest already. That is why a parliamentary committee, which is appointed by vested political interests, the outcome of their investigation is still just background for a journalist to launch further independent investigations. The moment you use agencies' investigations as the full story without engaging in your own side interrogations and examinations and questions and probing, then you are likely to fall into that trap of sources which cannot be absolutely trusted. And the danger for newspapers and the danger for the media here is that once you are perceived as not fair, as impartial, as serving other interests, then you begin to lose those audiences. You begin to lose those readerships, and then you get labels and tags. So it's a tricky balance to strike. How you can continue working and relating with those sources who may still want to use you to achieve their own ends. How you can continue working with them, and how you can still use the information they give you to also launch you in the space of time, because these are things that are highly perishable. This information apparently comes out in the morning. Within a matter of hours, your editor is on your neck. How far are we with this story? So that agency also of putting out stories sometimes creates pressure for incomplete, journalistic work that can be tested by those 5 principles of journalism. You fall short in some areas because of that agency, the lack of time. We must put out this story. The DCI says, or whoever tells you, that there will be an arrest tomorrow. So our story must precede the arrest. So you see, in the eye of readers who are less perceptive, then you are doing a splendid job. You are doing that you can actually predict events that have not happened, and they actually do happen. But in the eyes of the more perceptive readers, they want to question, how just did you go about getting this information that turns out to be true? So journalists always find themselves in a bind, and there are many examples, previous examples, that you can fall back on that warns journalists against fully relying on investigations that have been done by other parties and supplied to them, and they want to use that as the story itself. There is always a problem.
Okay. Yes. And I want to beg your forgiveness. When you saw me fiddling with my phone, I was trying to pull up the AP principles on anonymous sources just to flesh out the debate. Lucas, what Douglas has raised, it's not the first time I'm hearing that, because like he pointed out with the DCJ Mwilu case, even before her arrest, I think it was the Standard that carried a big headline telling us, coming up is a big arrest, big fish. Apart from that, even in court, in the Joey and Jackie Maribe case, it came up with a judge that, where's the press getting all this information? Are Douglas's concerns valid?
What I can say is
that you have gotten into bed, perhaps, with the investigative agencies at the expense of your independence.
No. What I can say is that journalists have sources, and it's sources which makes journalism thrive. If you don't have sources, you can't succeed in this field. So you have to have good sources, credible and reliable sources. So long as you have them, it's your work to highlight those issues, then you leave to the public to decide. But if you don't do, you'll be failing in your role. So our work, even if it's preceding the arrest or what, but so long as we are doing our work, I think we're okay.
Okay, as I try and pull up, okay, so finally it's opened. Hallelujah. Under AP's rules, material from anonymous sources may be used. Okay, let me just make that more visible for you. Is that okay? All right. Yes, number 1, the material is information and not opinion or speculation, and is vital to the news report. Secondly, the information is not available except under the condition of anonymity imposed by the source. 3, the source is reliable and in a position to have accurate information. Reporters who intend to use material from anonymous sources must get approval from their news manager before sending the story to the desk. The manager is responsible for vetting the material and making sure it meets their guidelines. The manager must know the identity of the source and is obligated, like the reporter, to keep the source's identity confidential. Only after they are assured that the source material has been vetted should editors allow it to be transmitted. Do you operate under these same rules, Lucas?
Sure. What we do, just like I said before, once a reporter brings the story, it has to be verified by the editor, and both of them have to verify the source, know the source, and decide why he or she is seeking anonymity. So if it's a crucial case and a stories of public interest, like the one that you are dealing with, the one of Itumbi, I think it's the editors and the reporter, they decide if that source is credible, you can go with the story instead of missing the story.
Okay. Edward, do you think, as the DP alluded to, that some of these stories are meant to fight battles, political battles?
Well, I mean, the nature of our political culture in this country for a long time has been that, you know, you can never differentiate sometimes between an election year and a year when the election has passed. We're always keeping ourselves in this cycle, which is a bit a disservice to our development course. Having said that, we have to accept one thing. You can have a very credible source at the time of publishing, but later on they recant. Even witnesses in court can recant their testimony. We saw that what happened in ICC. So, I mean, it's not new, and we cannot try to start now saying that journalists now should be an exception, because at the time of going to press, at the time of going live, you had your source verified. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is that we have to try as much as possible to rethink the model, as Douglas said, that is it speed versus accuracy? What are we going for here? And I think most of the emerging investigative news houses what they're doing is that they're giving themselves time so that they're not tied down to the rigors of daily reporting, so that you have enough sufficient time to do background checks, to do independent verification, to do corroboration, to actually ensure that your story is tight. But for you to do that, you need a new model that has to go beyond the daily stories that you have to churn out every now and then. Because this excitement to the idea of continuity broadcasting and coverage, it gives you pace, and sometimes you may lose out. Number three, what we need also to do is to train our journalists to actually be capable of doing investigative journalism better. And sources need time. Even security experts will tell you to cultivate an informant takes time. For you to earn their trust, for you to earn their confidence, it takes time. So a story may actually take so much time. And for me, I think this story that we're dealing with at the moment, it has come out in the manner it has come out because there was no adequate fermentation. I mean, how do you break the story of a deputy president, allegations of a deputy president's assassination? You need in-depth. You need more time and sensitivity to handle that matter, as opposed to just this whole superficiality we have accorded it.
Okay.
Sorry, maybe just to jump in. I've been given information before, and the people who gave me information either told me, I'm giving you this information in the interest of public good, that this information serves the wider public interest, so you need to put it out. There's another reason why a source can give you information, to hit back, to lash out at somebody, to hurt somebody. So usually, even after years of cultivation or months of cultivation, working closely with sources, you'll still want to interrogate their motivation for giving you certain information. Now, if you can pass that test, then probably you cannot go wrong with sources. But there's always a chance that, like Edward says, that there's always a chance that you could go wrong with sources. Yeah. So what is their motivation of giving you? The easiest, you see, like if somebody leaves Nation Media House today and they have information, they'll happily give it to me. For obvious reasons, you know, their motivation is clear. But if you are still employed here and you work here, for you to go to the levels of giving me information that is considered confidential here, but which you believe is in the interest of the public good, is a feat, is an achievement. I mean, it's you've weighed the benefits of your employment versus what you want to do to change society. Not many people do that. Yeah, so I'm always circumspect when it comes to dealing with sources. Always. And in fact, if you kept a story longer, there are some things you'll just take out that I no longer need this because it is not true, it is not even accurate, it's not factual. But under pressure of time, you know, this run-of-the-mill industry that we run today, there's a likelihood that every time you are caught up in these mines, these traps of sources, either recanting going wrong or...
Winnie, as the only female on the panel, I'll give you the privilege again of concluding this particular conversation. When Dennis Itumbi was arrested the following day, was that a restaurant around City Hall? Yes. Yes. Do you think it excused the Daily Nation, if it is indeed true, as Dennis has put it, that it excuses them for not picking up the phone and calling him and getting his side of the story, or at least checking in with him to confirm that he was not in hiding, as Cyprian Nyakundi had tweeted? Did it excuse them?
No, I think, let me say things in defense of Lucas. I think where there's, there's a smoke, there's fire. And in as much as we think that maybe the right procedure wasn't followed, and verification and verifying whether it's true that it happened, that things were happening in the DP's office, I guess there's something that is there that people are afraid of talking about. And I like what Dennis recently said in court, that Dennis is my friend, let me say it. Yeah, hi Dennis. He has the video, let him play it out. I know it will ruffle so many feathers and it will rattle so many people, but I guess there's some truth somewhere. I mean, Nation Media is of great repute. I don't think they would just do things for the sake of doing things. And in as much as we'd like to be in bed with our sources and just to show them that there's, we want to work together, there's still something, a journalist follows the cardinal rules that guide that person. That guide the journalist. In journalism, we follow those rules. And I don't think that Nation hired people who do not know or never went to school, journalist school. So I think it's a journalism school. I think it's imperative for us to realize that there's something somewhere that is burning. There's a problem between DP and OP's office, and they need a handshake. Those two, more than ever right now, they need a handshake. If they don't have a handshake in the next few months, I don't know. They need the handshake more than what we are saying. There's something that is boiling under. And when it blows out of, one day when it blows out, it will blow out of proportion.
Okay.
And it will be hard for us to repair that damage.
Okay.
So I ask for a handshake.
So the Daily Nation's nose for news is properly attuned?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, they can sniff out the smoke. Okay, and so that concludes the three major subjects, but I just want to quickly look at some of the other news as far as the press is concerned. Kipsigis Highlands Tea Factory guards attack journalist. That was published on Sunday, and Winnie, you had something to say on that. A journalist sustained injuries after being assaulted by guards at a private tea factory in Konoin, Bomet County, shortly after demonstrations by a section of the residents. Mr. Weldon Kirui, a reporter with, I do not know how to pronounce that properly, Touch FM, was assaulted by a guard as a battery of journalists sought to seek a comment from the factory manager over claims from the Chepchabas ward residents that it was discharging waste into two local rivers. At the entrance of the newly opened Kipsigis Highlands Tea Factory, 3 guards taking orders from a man inside the factory assaulted the journalists and sought to confiscate their cameras and telephones, saying the media would not be allowed entry. Confiscate their, okay, that's a quote. 3 of the guards at the factory's entrance advanced towards the journalist and attempted to grab a camera from a Nation writer, but Mr. Kirui and Mr. Hilary Mutai of MOFM intervened. As a result, one of the guards removed a nut concealed in his trousers and hit Mr. Kirui on the left cheek, injuring him on the gums. Winnie, you had said you had something to say on that.
I think, again, as an Association of Freelance Journalists, we have journalists who are based in different counties, and I think the security is paramount. And in the quest of just nosing out for news and looking for news and just reporting, Oh, okay. For this one, I see like there are different media houses who were going to look for news, and they went as a group, and that's hence they were able to see the danger that came out, and maybe they protected each other. But I think security of our journalists is paramount, and we might not have the, especially for freelance journalists, and even some of the correspondents might not have the maybe the cover, hospital coverage and everything, but we need to protect our journalists. It's very paramount that we protect our journalists. Yes.
Okay. There's also some tragic news which came out of Tanzania. Tonight on our international radar, we join our colleagues from Tanzania's Azam Media Group in mourning 5 of their crew members among 7 people who perished today in a tragic road accident at Shelui area in Tanzania. The other people sustained injuries during the crash that reportedly occurred when the vehicle they were traveling in collided head-on with a lorry. The deceased and survivors were headed to Chato, where they were scheduled to cover an event officiated by President John Pombe Magufuli on Tuesday. The 5 Azam Media crew members who died in the crash are cameraman Said Haji and Charles Wandwi, Salim Mhando, vision switcher, Florence Ndibalema, yes, forgive me for that, Ndibalema, sound, and Kasongo, engineer. Following the sad news, President John Pombe Magufuli sent a message of condolence to the family and friends of the deceased. Our condolences go out to their families and friends. And I do apologize. I think it's the hour. My eyes are starting to give up on me. So I want to thank you, the 4 of you, for making the time to join me on Presspass tonight. And thank you for staying up until, 11:45 and 37 seconds to watch Presspass. I will be with you next week. After that, Mark Masai will be back. In the meantime, either have yourself a good night or enjoy the rest of your viewing.